Hey, hello. Welcome to the live stream for July 4th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar.
Hey, hello.
And let me mute myself. There we go. Deborah is here. Hello. How are you doing tonight? Leslie, Surf Smurf. Welcome, welcome. Holidays can be a tough time for a lot of people. So even the 4th of July and kind of some maybe seemingly smaller holidays, especially when a person's first out of these types of relationships, it can be a really lonely, painful time. So hope everybody's doing okay tonight and that you're able to celebrate freedom on many different levels. Hello, Audrey. Welcome. Inspired, James, Noah, Tolly is new. Welcome, Tolly. So anything new and exciting going on with you guys? I was just watching a YouTube video about Stephen King and his writing. He is such an interesting guy, and I'm not a fan of horror like at all, but as a writer, he's so prolific and his personality is fantastic. I just really enjoy listening to him. I would love it if he were to ever retire from writing, if he would start a podcast. Maybe he has one. I need to check. Maybe he does. He just is a really interesting guy. Slavic says, do you remember Pet Sematary? Yes. On a couple different levels. The movie itself was terrifying, but that was actually, interestingly enough, what I renamed my ex as in my phone. So whenever he would text or I'd get emails or whatever, I just had it from emails. I had him in a folder called Pet Sematary. So it was just that reminder of like what I thought I loved and like what came back are two very different things. It was a good reminder. Gina is at home with her kids. She bought some fireworks and waiting for the sun to set. Good for you. Tolly is cuddling with her cat. Surf Smurf is going to have dinner at her dad's, and then they're going to go see Chicago. Very cool. Oh, wow. Slavic Princess says, you are one of the first hosts on YouTube that have introduced me to narcissism towards the end of 2015. Wow. That's cool. I can imagine it's quite the rabbit hole, isn't it? Like once you start learning about all this and and there's so many different speakers out there, which I think is a great thing because I think each of us brings kind of their own perspective and their own approach to this material. So I think it can be good for people to hear like a wide variety of speakers and information and approaches to all of this. I think kind of combined, it helps people to put together the pieces. So I'm sure that you've had lots of aha moments since 2015. So, and if you would like to share some of those, I think we would love to hear them. I know I would. I'm always interested in the aha moments that other people have, you know, because we all tend to have our own aha moments, and sort of like what Agata was saying in the book club live stream last week about, for example, with my second book, Out of the Fog, and she had made the comment that she thought that maybe a person who was like still in an abusive relationship or maybe just fresh out, like a lot of that material like just wouldn't resonate with them. And after she said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I bet you're right. I think a person does need a little bit of time for the dust to settle before any of this stuff starts making sense. So it just was something that I hadn't thought about before. And I think that's kind of the challenge for all of us. Like once we are so far out from this, like we've, for me, it's been quite a few years since I went through this. It's amazing, this stuff, like you just see things through your own perspective, like where you are now. And it can be really difficult to go back and think like, where was my mindset back then? And so I don't know. I'm always interested in how people perceive stuff and how I could be more effective and what I can do different. Slavic Princess says, yes, I definitely have had a lot of aha moments. Okay, let's scroll up here. She says, I have learned so much that I think it's imperative for children to actually do inner child work on themselves to prevent themselves from developing personality disorders. I think it would definitely be helpful if more like emotional health kind of stuff was taught to children at a very young age. I think one of the challenges with emotional health stuff in general is, it's not taught. And a lot of children, the material that is taught to children it's very much like good guys are good, bad guys are bad. The good guy always wins. Like it's pretty cut and dry. And even with adult stuff, I think kind of the whole like George R.R. Martin Game of Thrones series, that was the shock of it all and the appeal of it all, of like sometimes good guys don't win. And sometimes bad people can come across as good people. And sometimes different types of events can bring out the worst in people. So, but, you think about childhood 100 years ago and like, Grimm brother fairy tales, stuff that just the life experiences of children, it was so much more, I think, on par with reality. It was like, okay, yeah, there are some bad people out in the world, like bad things do happen. And so in a way, it was like children are kind of more prepared for reality. And so I think a lot of us, if we just weren't really exposed to this stuff when we were younger, or had an idea that these kinds of people walked the earth, or that they could that they just like what it really means for a person to not have a moral compass, it's just such a shock when you're learning about all of this, because it's like, I just didn't know that this was a thing. And, I just always figured I could spot a problematic person. So, but yeah, understanding inner child work would be really helpful. I think that kind of stuff about childhood wounds and would probably maybe starting in, people are teenagers. I think one of the reasons that stuff isn't taught is because if a child is in a dysfunctional home and you've got a therapist or a mental health professional of any kind, or even an educator talking about stuff like this dysfunction and dysfunctional homes, I think the unintended consequence of that is that it can really stir the pot at home. Because I think there's a lot of kids that live in like a den of dysfunction. And so like having it, which it's hard, like how do you approach this stuff without, I can imagine like as a former teacher, there would be like all kinds of parents, with pitchforks in hand that would be really upset. Like how, you're turning my child against me. What are you teaching them? This isn't right. You've got some sort of agenda, blah, 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 blah. So I almost think starting when kids are, 18 or at least older teenagers to understand just kind of like healthy boundaries and, well, maybe inner child stuff. I think healthy boundary stuff really should be taught starting at like the age of 2, and like autonomy and like, this is your body. These are your feelings. This is getting in tune with like your wants and your needs and like who you are as a person, and then helping children to develop resiliency. Like the world is not fair, and it can be really hurtful, but it's still really good. Like there's still so much out there that's just awesome. And it's so cool that you can explore that, So we were talking in the support group today a little bit about inner child stuff. And, that's one of those concepts that a lot of people, myself included for a long, long time, tend to be very confused about. And a lot of people, like, especially if a person's in therapy, and the situation that we were talking about today, the gal was saying, she's like, my therapist keeps trying to bring everything back to like my inner child. And she's like, I grew up in an abusive home. She's like, but I don't think that was like everything is related to that. Like, I think there's other things going on as to why I got involved with this person. And, like, how can you say everything goes back to the inner child? And I would agree. I think that's a very like reductionist approach to think kind of all of the problems that we have as an adult can be like directly linked back to childhood wounding. I think that is definitely a part of it. It definitely can set the stage for some problematic thinking and actions. But I think a lot of people, how, we can end up in these relationships for like a wide variety of reasons. And sometimes it might be, our vulnerabilities have been exploited. I think just the awareness, if a person really goes through life thinking that, other people are going to treat you the way that you treat them, and that like family is forever, and that commitment is forever, and that they just don't have an understanding that some people out there have such problematic personalities that like their communication's not going to work with them. Like our love isn't going to fix them. I think the vast majority of people out there just don't understand that until they get tangled up with somebody like this. And then even then, like they need to go through it and be on the other side of it before they start to realize this. So I think there's a lot of different factors at play. Okay, let me scroll down here and see. Vahid, welcome. Am I saying your name right? I feel like I say it wrong every single time I say it. Manju, hello. That's a very valid point, Missouri Cowboy. He says, if a pot isn't stirred, the dish is burned, ruined, just like the children. Wow, that's really well said. I agree. I agree. Yeah. There's a whole children's book series that I have all these different books, like different stages of completion, but I think it would be really cool to get you guys' feedback on them. I still need to figure out a way to do that, to get people's feedback on stuff. Oh, speaking of which, my book cover, and I may change it. I may change the title, but I would like to see you guys' opinion on it. I got the final draft of the book cover for the Narcissist's Playbook. So it's so hard. It's one of those things like, I like the title, I like the cover, I like the tagline, but the tagline is how to win at a game you never intended to play. I just like that so much, but I don't know if the cover is going to resonate. I guess my concern is that a lot of narcissists are going to read it and like sort of like that book, what is it, like the 48 Laws of Power? Like it's going to resonate with the wrong crowd. Not that I care if narcissists necessarily read it, but I just want to make sure the book finds its way to the people that I'm trying to reach. So I don't know. Maybe I should put a tab on my website and see and have you guys, go there. We could start a poll or something. Slavic says about children, she says, they should have their own voice. You're absolutely right about how inner child work could stir the pot for children that live in a dysfunctional home. Yeah, that was the thing, one of the things that stressed me out the most when I was working with teenagers. And I worked with kids in a group home setting. It was like an alternative to juvenile hall. And a lot of these kids came from like really dysfunctional homes. I mean, I'm talking like incest, prostitution, heavy drug use, just all kinds of stuff. And we had this really wonderful therapist there. And it was a really, I thought it was a great environment. It was just very nurturing. And we had 6 kids at a time. So it was a fairly small group of kids. And there was tons of like life skills and just all kinds of classes that it was mandatory that they attended while they were there. And so we all taught, our own different types of classes and stuff. But it was just kind of that feeling of like, okay, so now these kids are awake and aware of kind of what like normal or healthy is and what dysfunctional is. But then when they get out of here in 6 months and then they go back home, then what? And it's really hard because here you have this kid who's 15, 16, they don't have control. They're stuck at home. They can't move out. And now they're awake to just how bad things are. I don't know. It's a tough place. Okay, let's see. Jennifer says, one of my friends has 3 kids and is going through a divorce. It seems based on everything she says, her ex sounds like a narcissist. He even told their joint counselor that she doesn't hear him and he's contemplated suicide. But she's shown me texts and it seems he uses the kids against her. Are there any books to introduce her to the concept of NPD? It seems like he's turning people against her. If they have a joint counselor, I would encourage her to show those texts to the counselor because narcissists can be so convincing and so manipulative. And it could also be, it's their mindset of how they perceive things. So to a narcissist, if you go against them, if you set boundaries, if you stand up for yourself, if you tell them no, if you challenge them, they really do feel wounded. So it's not even that he's like potentially putting on this huge show. Like it can just speak to like, this is how twisted their mindset is. And they do feel like the victim, because in their mind, it's this idea of like, look at what you made me do. Like you made me yell at you. You made me hit you. You made me do all these things. Like there's no accountability there. So that's oftentimes why they come across as so convincing, but it's like their mindset is just so twisted. So if the counselor is not seeing it, I would encourage your friend to show her these texts. I mean, at a minimum, if he's threatening suicide, I mean, that's definitely trying to hold somebody emotionally hostage, and that's not cool. So, yeah, I would let the counselor know. As far as books that might resonate with her, let me think. I would say Divorce Poison is a good book about kind of what to expect when divorcing a manipulative person. So that's a great book. I don't know. I'll be curious to see what other people have to say. I mean, I have my Start Here book, which is about it's like a kind of a crash course to understanding narcissism in general. It's tricky. I don't know, depending on how open her counselor is to understand, narcissism. There's a lot of counselors out there that are not open to kind of pathologizing the other person, which, to some extent I can understand, but to the person that's on the receiving end of it, if they're being manipulated, they're being controlled, they're going through all of this stuff, it can really help to set them free to just realize this is not normal. Like there's some real problems here. I guess maybe even sending some videos about like a smear campaign, something that speaks more directly to her situation. I would probably do that if she's open, if she watches YouTube videos at all. Oftentimes when people kind of get just like a whiff of getting on the right trail, they'll just take off with it because it's like, oh my God, yes, like this is what I've been experiencing. And just everything starts making so much more sense to them. Let's see here. Slavic Princess says, the first aha moment occurred the moment when I actually noticed the last narcissist that I dated started devaluing me weeks after he was love bombing me. Yeah. Sweetbriar, you're totally right. She says, teaching inner child work can be wacky among the self-help crowd. Putting it into general education for all children invites raw chaos. Just adding good counselors into clinics isn't easy. Yeah, I mean, it would be a massive undertaking to even try to do something like this. So here was kind of one of my thoughts. When I was a kid, I had these books that I thought was a fantastic concept. I didn't really get that into them because just the characters were about like old famous people, like Benjamin Franklin, people like, that I just didn't care about. But it was a book series called The Value. What was it? The Value books. I think it was what it was about. And each character, they would talk about like the value of friendship or like the value of honesty or the value of compassion or whatever. It was these different values, and these little characters would kind of go along and it would talk about these different values. And I love that series. It's old. I think it's probably out of print nowadays, but to do something like that and talk about these things, but in like a healthy context and really kind of start spelling this stuff out of like, what is a friend? Because I see all the time, and I've fallen into it too, where people will say, oh, my friends are so mean to me. And it's like, well, then those aren't friends. So starting like at a young age with like kind of spelling out, this versus that, like just because you have certain things in common with a person doesn't really make them a friend. A person who's a friend, there's that mutual sense of trust and support. And that's the foundation of it. So I don't know. There's lots of ideas. Okay, let me scroll up here. Last Miranda says, my mother is very toxic, but in front of others, she acts like Mother Teresa, and no one can understand that I'm distant towards her. How do I cope with the environment not understanding? I think it's one of those things about having to do with just acceptance. Other people are most of them are not going to understand. They have their own kind of belief system about, what family is. Generally, the family's forever. How can you do this? She's your mother. She's not getting any younger, blah, blah, blah. It's they're coming at you with their own perceptions and misconceptions about what's going on. And so you don't have to engage in any conversation that you don't want to engage in. So if somebody starts in on you about that, oh, it's your mom and she's not getting any younger and yada, 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 you can either just change the topic or just say, you know what, I appreciate your concern. Please understand you don't know the half of it. Like I have reasons. Our relationship is the way it is for very valid reasons that I really don't want to get into. So please, let's just talk about something else, and if they keep at it and they're like, well, no, I really want to talk about your relationship with your mother, right? Like they kind of keep pushing the issue. You can just say, you know what, I'm just not open to talking about this. and you can just hold that line. And if they keep at it and they keep badgering you, then say, you know what, I think I need to go now. I'll call you later, or, I think I just need to go. And then you grab your stuff and then you leave. So you don't need to stand there and argue your point or try to justify it. It's your life. It's okay to have the boundaries that you have, and most other people in general are not going to understand. And it would be an exhausting job for you to try to go through and get everybody to understand where you're coming from, because it's just not going to happen. So I think realizing that they have their mindset based on like their experiences and their understandings about a mother-daughter relationship, and they just have certain limitations with understanding and accepting that for what it is and holding your boundaries. So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Yes, Little Britches. That's a cute name. Little Britches says, my narcissistic BFF just ended our relationship and blocked me. She hurt me in front of friends, and when I called her out on it, she deflected and played the victim and told me I was being petty and told me goodbye. Now I feel really hurt and angry. Arg. Yeah. It makes sense. It's infuriating when somebody does wrong. They don't see it, and then they spin it around to make themselves the victim and you the bad guy. That kind of stuff is absolutely enraging. But, it goes back to what we were just talking about with getting clear on the definition of a friend. So, I had struggled with this too. When I was younger, my quote unquote best friend in high school, it was totally an abusive relationship. The good times were really good. The bad times were really bad. She was jealous and demanding and controlling and awful to me when she didn't get her way. And I used to joke about our relationship being like an abusive relationship, because in my mind, I thought, well, this can't be an abusive relationship. Like, we're not dating. Do you know what I mean? Like, in my mind, it was, only guys are abusive and only girls get abused, but that only happens if they're in a relationship, because that was the only context I'd ever had about this kind of stuff at the time. But, now I see it for what it is, but it took me, a long time, 25 years, to see it for what it was. And I think the big takeaway is to understand, like, what is a friendship? It's not just somebody being friendly. It's based on that person needs to be emotionally safe for you. Like, there needs to be that sense of mutual trust and support, not an emotional roller coaster. And then, you really don't feel unsafe around this person, or if you ever criticize them or kind of quote unquote go against them or do something that they don't like, that there's going to be hell to pay. Like, that's not a friendship. That's a hostage situation. Like, that's, there's no mutuality there. So I just would say, it's just kind of a lot of these lessons are really hard won, unfortunately. Right? Kevin, you're so right on. He says, yes, sex ed in school was mostly tab A goes into slot B. And there was no discussion of relationships and emotions. Yes. And I think that is something else that needs to be taught. Understanding, like, sex isn't just sex, that there oftentimes and maybe there should be, right, emotions attached to having sex, and that emotions can develop for somebody, whether we want them to or not, if we're sexually intimate with another person. And just the whole discussion with, like, be aware of that. So if you are intimate with another person, this is why it can be great to go slow, because even if you think that you're just out there having fun, you can develop feelings for the wrong people, because there's, chemical connections that happen. during sex. So yes, Ellie says emotional safety. Yes. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that's a big kind of like aha thing for a lot of people. A lot of people, understandably so, they get caught up in the thinking of, you know, like, is this person a narcissist? Are they not a narcissist? Am I making too big of a deal out of things? Or, you know, I'm dating this new person, but I'm not really quite sure, or what have you. And, you know, you probably heard me just hammer this point home a million times. And I talk all the time about pulling stuff back. We don't need to wait until there's like concrete proof that this person really is going to cause destruction in our lives. If we can pull it back to the point of, are we feeling that perpetual confusion? Are we feeling mental anguish? Are we feeling just enraged, crazy making, I just exhausted? These are all the early warning signs to that. And asking yourself, is this other person, do I feel like they're emotionally safe? Because it makes sense, right? That you wouldn't trust. It's normal to have trust issues with a person who's not emotionally safe. If somebody's hurt you, if they've done you wrong, if they've broken your trust, it's normal and healthy and understandable that you're going to have trust issues with them. So it's not you, right? Like, that's a normal response to a person violating your trust. So asking yourself, okay, because that's all you need to know. Like, does this other person feel emotionally safe, or do they feel emotionally unsafe? And maybe they feel emotionally unsafe only in certain areas. Like, maybe you have a coworker who just seems to get like really threatened and does a 180 and runs real hot and cold whenever you talk about anything good in your life, right? Like, that's just, you're hitting raw nerves there. You talk about, you got a different car, even if you're like, this is nuts. Like, this person makes twice as much as me. They, they have like so much more going for them than maybe I do right now in my life. But for whatever reason, if I talk about anything going well for me, they lash out. So, but maybe outside of that, they're totally fine. So if you know, okay, this person's just emotionally unsafe in certain areas, take some steps back and then reevaluate. And you might have to tell yourself, okay, I just can't share this kind of stuff with that person. We don't need to figure out if they're personality disordered or if it's, any of that. Like, it just cuts through that confusion and that introspection. Is it me? Is it them? What did I do? Why are they acting this way? It just, pull back, reevaluate, adjust, kind of a thing. Yes, Gina, I hear you. Says, I couldn't tell the difference between emotionally safe and emotionally unsafe. Yes, I agree. And I think that's so common for so many people. And I will say that that's a skill that takes time to develop. And the more, I think, competent you become with that, the more confident you will become with that. So, and I would also encourage you to not focus on, like, you don't need to get this right, like 100% right out of the gate. I think there's a lot of people that think, oh my goodness, I keep attracting all these narcissists, and they get so down on themselves about that. And again, I get it. I was there too. And I still feel that way if one slides under my radar. But sometimes it just takes a little while to see a person's true colors. And that's okay. We're not going to, some people are better at manipulating than others. And so all we can ever do is just kind of, proceed with caution. Somebody starts kind of acting a little funny or something's going on with them, to just pull it back a little bit or go no contact, whatever you feel that you need to do to stay safe. But the whole emotionally safe thing, if you can look, and maybe something that would help with this is think about maybe the last handful of problematic people that you've come across, and try to think of it in a place of curiosity of okay, what were some of the earliest signs that they were emotionally unsafe? What did I maybe gloss over, or what did I give them the benefit of the doubt on? And the more I think you can approach it from like a place of curiosity. This isn't from a place of judgment. It's not about getting upset with yourself and thinking, oh, I should have seen that, or I should have, it's not even about any of that. It's just from a place of curiosity. So you can examine what kind of stuff you were glossing over so you can do it different next time. Okay, let's see. Finn says, question, do you think I can try to have low contact with my uncompromising, emotionally unsupportive, passive-aggressive ex? I feel like no contact is really making me more anxious. I think everybody's situation is different. And if you feel that it might smooth things over to have low contact, go for it. Sometimes it can. I mean, it totally depends on yours. Like, your situation the best, So sometimes going no contact with certain types of narcissists can absolutely enrage them, and it can put a person in harm's way. So there really is no one size fits all. It's about doing damage control based on like what you think is going to help in your situation. And I mean, a lot of it's trial and error. So, but you could move forward and, okay, we're going to do low contact. I would encourage you, okay, this is, what you're walking into. This is emotionally unsupportive, passive aggressive person. Prepare yourself for that. Emotionally prepare yourself for that. I would document everything. I'd keep it all in text and email, and ideally text or email. So there's a paper trail with this kind of stuff, and only keep contact for whatever is absolutely necessary. This is not an emotionally safe person. So, proceed with caution and really make sure that you don't have any kind of delusions or that you're holding on to hope that things could be anything other than what time has proven that they are. So, okay, let's see here. Cha-cha-cha. Sherry, hi Sherry, says, hi Dana, it's been 2.5 years. I still cannot date. Everyone seems covert. It's difficult to tell who is genuine. I'm alone forever. I think it's time. It's time. And it can be very difficult to tell right away. And that's the thing is none of us, one of the books we read for book club, I forget which one, they said it so well. They said something along the lines of like, none of us are a good judge of character. And I would agree with that. It's much easier to get a false positive about somebody than a false negative, meaning the overt, the like wolf in wolf's clothing. We can generally be a good judge of character of like, yes, that is a wolf in wolf's clothing. I see that person coming. They've got a whole, they're waving red flags. They're just red flag city, right? It's much easier to get a false positive and to think, oh, this person is so charming and delightful when they're not. And time just really will take care of a lot of that. And it's so hard too with internet stuff. If you've been like meeting people on the internet, there's just, especially dating sites. I mean, there's so many disingenuous people out there. I would say it's probably 40-50% of them. I mean, it's high. There's just a lot of like married people out there, people that are scammers. And, that's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of like meetup.com and getting out and just building a life that you love and doing hobbies and starting things that you really enjoy. And because it kind of cuts down on people that are just looking for sex. It cuts down on people that are just looking to scam. Most people that are in meetup groups are there because they want to meet new people and do new things. I think your odds of meeting quality people are higher. I mean, you still have to obviously like use healthy boundaries and kind of filter them out that way, but just going slow. And you've got all this stuff down. I mean, you know what it feels like when something feels right for you and when something feels wrong for you, and you're in control and you can back things up. If things are starting to get a little bit uncomfortable, you're setting the pace, and you can keep yourself safe because of that. So if somebody starts acting squirrely or treating you in a way that's not okay, you're in control. But I get it. It's hard. It's hard to get out there and date. And you've probably heard me talk about this. I think so many people tend to feel so broken after abuse because we can look around and be like, what's wrong with me? Why do I have such issues with trust? Everybody else just seems so carefree. They're taking everything at face value and they're falling in love and people are moving in together after the first month, and there's just this whirlwind. And it's easy to look at that and think, oh, there's something really wrong with me. But the reality is that stuff is not healthy. And I would say probably at least a high percentage of those relationships are going to crash and burn because there is no foundation there. And there's just a lot of, like I said, there's just a lot of disingenuous people out there. So don't think that just because you have concerns and like a healthy degree of skepticism about people, that somehow means anything negative. I think it's just part of like learning that trust is something that's earned. It's not something that's just so freely given, and that it just takes time. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Yeah, Alcuda Babe says, I'm starting to realize I can't have certain talks with my family. And I get they think differently than me, but I guess all I've ever wanted to do is argue my viewpoint effectively as they do. It's hard to unlock horns and just realize like, this is a waste of my time. Like, this is not going to get anywhere. It's just going to end in a fight. They're going to get upset. I'm going to get frustrated. They're going to get annoyed. Then what? Like, I'm not going to change their mind. There's just no point. I mean, there's certain topics with my own family that it's the same way. Like, I just don't even open that door because there's no point. It's just everybody's going to get upset and we don't see eye to eye, and so I don't go there. And if they start getting on me about something, I just shoot that stuff down. It's like, I don't want to stand here and just defend myself and deal with this. And here's an example. I first got into vegetarianism when I was about 13. And so I'm 40 now. And I got so much heat from so many people. I grew up in Texas, and there weren't a lot of vegetarians. I don't think I knew any, actually, growing up. I don't even know if I knew the word for it. I just knew that I didn't want to eat meat anymore. And I had so much pressure and all kinds of like misinformation and just, people wanting to argue. You still nonstop like want to argue that with me. And it's like, and it just, geez, it's exhausting. It's exhausting for me to even think about it. Like, it's like, I don't want to argue my point of view, not forcing it on you. Like, believe I can eat anything at pretty much any restaurant. I can make it work. Like, just don't even like, let's just talk about something else, It's frustrating. Oh yeah. Welcome. Karma is here. Stacy, the Sparkling Star. That's a cute name. Okay, let's see. Jennifer is talking about her boyfriend. Something, I've never heard that term before. Enneagram? Enneagram, Enneagram. She says, my boyfriend is a 3W4. And based on the description of that type of behavior, it seems like a person that's been hurt and copes through narcissistic behavior, which means I don't know if how he is normal or if it's covert narcissistic behavior. All types can have healthy, unhealthy types. That's why I'm confused. So let's, oh, Sherry, thank you for the live stream donation. I appreciate that. I've missed you too. It has been a long time since I've seen your name pop up. Jennifer, I haven't heard of that term, but here's the thing. I tell you, girl, it will set you free if you can flip it around and make it more about you and your deal breakers and your standards and your boundaries. It so does not matter what's going on with somebody else. It really doesn't. It doesn't matter if they're a narcissist or if they're a sociopath or if they're borderline personality or bipolar or have a head injury or were abandoned as children. I know that sounds really harsh to say that stuff doesn't matter. And I don't mean it in a cold, calloused way. I'm just saying it doesn't play a part as far as determining what our boundaries and standards and deal breakers are. So, for example, my behavior, my level of what I expect, my expectations in my life are universal. They apply to anybody, regardless of anything, because I don't do perpetual confusion or mental anguish or crazy making or being disrespected. Like, I don't do it. So if a person's dangerous or destructive to me in any way, shape, or form, I distance myself. So it just takes the burden off with you trying to have to figure it all out and figure out, okay, well, what is this person and what does this mean and what does that mean? All any of us can do is to assert ourselves. So if somebody crosses a boundary or if they're acting in a way that's disrespectful to us, if you assert that boundary and say, hey, you know what? That's not okay with me. And if they continue to fight that, oh, I was just joking, or you need to lighten up, or you need to this. And you're like, yeah, well, you might have been joking, but that wasn't funny to me, or that was kind of concerning to me. If you can bring this stuff up, because other people, here's the thing, other people don't know where our boundaries are. So granted, some of this stuff is like the basics of adult behavior. Like there's certain things I expect a person to know, like do not yell at me, right? Stuff you learn in kindergarten. Like you don't yell, you don't cuss, you don't hit, you don't pinch, you don't steal, you don't do these things. Like most people have this stuff mastered by like the age of 7. So I'm not going to entertain trying to explain that to another adult. Like they need to know that. So that would be deal breaker stuff for me. But outside of that, like what one person might find funny or annoying or any of that kind of stuff, to be able to just assert yourself and bring that up. And if they don't handle that well, if they keep fighting you about that, then, okay, now you need to kind of reevaluate, okay, what does that mean? If I'm not getting through to this person, they're not willing to change, where are my deal breakers with this? Because that's indicative of a bigger problem. So if there is no kind of solutions-oriented communication there, if it's them continually crossing your boundaries or acting in a way that you're not comfortable with or that you find questionable, and if this continues and you bring it up and then nothing changes, they're not willing to work towards kind of that common ground, then at some point there needs to be a deal breaker instead of just continually bringing it up, because then we're just nagging the person. It goes back to like the whole, like, we're just frustrating ourselves and annoying them. Like, there's no point. So getting clear on kind of where your lines in the sand are with that kind of stuff. Okay, let's see. Okay. Sivan, is that how you pronounce your name? I think is it Sivan? It might be Sivan. Says, hi, can you recommend ways to avoid feeling so hurt and offended when one of these personality types slips under our radar? It's pretty triggering for me. It's triggering for me too. And I guess I think just realizing that it just happens, like it just takes time to get to know somebody. And we're not, like I was saying before, none of us are a good judge of character. Nobody is. Like it just takes time. There's just really charming, problematic people out there. The Bill Cosbys or the Scott Petersons of the world, they're out there. And all any of us can do is when we start seeing things that don't add up, or when that stuff does surface, to then respond to it accordingly. It's not you. It's not a reflection on, odds are it's not a reflection of anything within you. Do you know what I mean? Like some of these people are really, really slick, and it has nothing to do with like our childhood wounds or our vulnerabilities or anything else. Like sometimes they just slide under our radar, but it's more important instead of focusing on kind of who's attracted to us, because that's a crapshoot. Like we have no control over that. It's more about who we are attracted to and how long we let these people stay in our lives. So if they're wonderful to you to a certain point, and then you find out, boom, there's some really rotten stuff there, then we handle that as that comes up. Not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of them. Gina says, I think I am afraid if I let my guard down that the narcissist or one of his monkeys will find a way back in, and I'm just too hurt to let that happen. Yes. And she says, I think even well-meaning people can get ensnared with manipulation from a narcissist. I was not aware I was being manipulated either. Hands down. Yeah, you bring up so many great points, Gina. Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of flying monkeys, are, at least 50% of the time, are normal, decent, good people who believe everything that the narcissist is saying, because most people don't go through life being a pathological liar. So it doesn't even cross their mind to think that this person is living in this whole fantasy land and saying all of these things. Because it's like just not on a normal person's radar, especially if that person's really charming. Like they would not think to question that. So, it's really easy for normal, good people to get roped in to attacking the real victim, thinking that they're doing the right thing. So, and Gina also says, I differentiate between acceptance and forgiveness, but it's been my anger that has helped me to walk away and go no contact and stay no contact. You bring up a really valid point. I think a lot of people get to that place where people will start saying, you need to forgive. You need to forgive, even if they're saying you need to release this anger. And for a lot of people, they're like, you know what? That doesn't feel safe to me. And you might even realize you're like, you know what? I know that holding on to this anger is only hurting me, but I feel like if I put down this anger, which it's righteous anger, okay, which makes it even that much harder to put down. I have a hard time putting down this anger because I don't want to ever forget. And that anger is keeping me safe. And I feel like if I somehow am able to move forward or put down this anger, that I could slip up and just think and somehow start being friendly to this person. And then boom, they're back in my life and they cause me more pain. That's a hard line for a lot of people to walk. So you're not the only one with that. I think kind of the way around that, or another way to handle that, is to realize that that anger has a message for you. All of our emotions have messages for us. And all of our emotions, all of these messages are designed to try to keep you safe at all times. So even the probably more so, like the unpleasant feelings, the more severe the feeling, especially if it's negative, it tends to have like the more important the message that it has. So with anger, oftentimes, if we can hold on to that message and then work towards like releasing that feeling, and you might want to write it down, you know? And so if they do try to enter your life, you can go read that letter where you write a letter like, "Dear Gina, you know, I want to work towards, you have righteous anger about what happened, but I understand that this anger is going to continue to eat away at me if I don't do something healthy with it. So I need to work towards releasing it or channeling it into pouring it into something positive. And so this is the direction I'm going to head. I don't want you to forget the message that this anger has for you. Here are all of the reasons as to why you can never have these people in your life again." And you list it all out in like bullet point format, and you fold up that letter and you put it in your drawer. And if they ever try to come back into your life, you know, I can go to this letter. I'm not losing the message. I have the message loud and clear. You know, that might really help. And then funneling a lot of that anger that you have into something positive, ideally building up a life that you love. So if you love gardening, if you love cooking, if you love photography, whatever it might be, scrapbooking, pouring that energy into that. There's a lot of power in anger. And if you can harness it for something that's good, it can really take your life. You kind of win in a couple different ways, because it can really, you know, it's like you're kind of taking the positive in your life and you're strapping it to a pack of horses, you know, and it just, if you can get them going in a positive direction, it's just amazing how much good can come from that. So, but yeah, I hope that helps. Deborah says, yes, indeed. We need constant reminders of why we left these people. Yeah. Yeah, it does help. And Gina says, I will write out my anger confirmation message and I will tape it on my wall. And you know what? If you start to feel naked or vulnerable without that anger, realize perhaps start playing with setting it down and then picking it back up again. So realizing, okay, you know what? I am going to work. Like, I don't need this anger right now. Like right now, I'm going to scrapbook and I'm going to turn on some, I don't know, what do people even listen to? Podcasts, I guess, or some music. And I'm just going to have a good time right now for the next 3 hours. This anger, I don't need this. So I'm going to make the conscious decision. And you might even want to visualize it as like a ball, like a big red, like a little mini sun, right? It's just this big red fiery ball. I'm just going to take it and I'm just going to put it right here, right on the table. And I'm going to set it down and I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to have some anger-free fun right now. And at the end of those 3 hours, if I so choose, if it feels safer, I can pick up that anger and I can put it back in my pocket. and just realizing that you are not your anger, that this is something that, and that you're in control, that you can pick it up and you can put it down. And I think realizing that you can put it down and that you know how to keep yourself safe. You really do know that you're in charge. You know, you've learned a lot of these lessons. You're not going to forget them. You're going to write them down. You're going to reread them if you need to. Can really help to soften that, because so many people, and I get it because I was there too, they have this anger and they're like, I just don't know what to do with it. And they're just holding on to it. And they're like, I wish I could put it down, but I don't know how. I don't know how. And it's destroying my life. And I can't like just forgive. Like maybe I'll never forgive. I'm not ready to forgive. I don't want to say it somehow that what happened to me was okay. I don't want to let it go. I don't want to move forward. I feel like if I move forward, that I'm somehow not being authentic, or I'm somehow saying that what happened wasn't that bad when it was. It was incredibly painful. And so people can really feel torn about, how do I move forward and heal and still honor what happened to me? And I think that's how it's picking it up and putting it down and harnessing that energy and using it for good, and realizing you have righteous anger. It's understandable and appropriate that you are upset by what happened to you. So that anger is there for a reason, but we don't have to let it ruin our lives. Like we can harness it. Okay, let me. Taldunam says, I personally think forgiveness can only come after acceptance, but maybe it never comes. I think it depends on the situation and the person. Yes. And I think it depends on the definition, how we're defining forgiveness. So I personally am not a fan of that word. I think it's so misused and misunderstood and misapplied that it's almost dangerous. So I always try to clarify with other people. Like when I was going through all of this and people would tell me, oh, well, you need to forgive. You need to forgive. Frankly, when other people tell you stuff like that, it's more because they have anxiety. They don't know what to say. Like they have anxiety about your situation. It's the same kind of stuff when people say, like if somebody dies, right? And they'll say, oh, well, they're in a better place now, or at least they're not suffering, or like they're trying to console a person right away. And it's like, you know what? I just want to be sad. Like, I don't want to hear how everything is okay and that they're in a better place. Like, I miss this person. So, and when people do that, when they console other people or they try to give like unwarranted or unwanted advice, it's more about them relieving their own anxiety than them. And they don't realize that they're doing it, but that's where that stuff's coming from. So when people would talk to me about forgiveness, and of course it was always unwanted. It was always an unwanted conversation that I felt it was like people just make small talk. They don't know what to say. And so they're like, well, forgiveness is key, and words. And then I would get upset because I was a million miles away from even wanting to think about that, let alone like deal with any of that at that time. But I would say, in terms of releasing anger, that's something that I'm going to have to work through. And then I would just shut that down. So I think it's absurd and insane when people have a really dangerous or destructive person has hurt them or hurt somebody in their family, and then they somehow equate forgiveness into like being friends with that person. I think that's just ludicrous. And I've seen this stuff on the news where people are like, well, I forgive my son's killer, and then they go have lunch with the person. I'm like, are you nuts? Like, that's like outrageous. That's just outrageous behavior. And so the fact that term can be so like misconstrued is really concerning to me, because then it puts people in harm's way. So I think we can work towards releasing anger towards another person, but realize if that person's dangerous and destructive for whatever reason, we need to keep them at arm's length. If they've hurt us, if they, raping, molesting, murdering, any of that kind of stuff, that's like extreme behavior. Like we need to be careful with that kind of stuff and not like warmly welcome it into our lives because we somehow think it makes us more spiritual or like a good person, because it doesn't. It makes a person foolish. So I try to be really clear with people about forgiveness. Lucy, in my second book, Out of the Fog, had a lot to say about forgiveness. And I really, really liked everything that she had to say about that. And she says, talks about like forgiveness is a transactional event. Like a person needs to be fully repentant. They need to accept full responsibility of their behavior. They need to take massive action to correct the damage that's done. And it needs to not happen again. And then the person on the receiving end of that apology, that sincere apology, decides, okay, if I'm going to forgive this person, like, are they sincere? Are they taking massive action? Blah, blah, blah. That's when forgiveness is warranted. And I would agree with that. But I think we may never, most likely if we're dealing with a narcissist, you're never going to get a sincere apology and you're never going to get closure. So I think we have to make our own closure. We have to work towards releasing that anger that we feel so it doesn't ruin our lives. And like I was saying, directing it into a positive direction. Yes, you're right. Sweet Briar, you're so right. Spot on. Says, that advice you gave about bringing the focus back to your own boundaries and deal breakers is inner child work. Learning how to live out of our own purpose and not reacting is us growing up. Thank you for mentioning that. And you had a great comment a while back, and I wish I would have copied and pasted it because I pinned it to the top. I think it was a live stream. I pinned it to the top of a live stream, but now I don't remember which one it was. And it was all about inner child stuff. And it was fantastic about learning to, repairing that kind of inner child stuff and becoming our authentic self and like what this really means and living just a life of purpose on purpose and being our authentic selves. So yes, really, really great point. I think I need to make a note to myself because I somehow, and I don't know why, I always keep thinking about like inner child stuff as more of like unhealed wounds, but that's only a part of it. It really is about like reconnecting with your authentic self and boundaries and standards and deal breakers and likes and dislikes and, our authentic nature. I don't know why. It's weird. I don't know why I keep like going back to that or like focusing on that one part of it. Missouri Cowboy says, Dana, why do flying monkeys become flying monkeys? How can they be good people when their actions of abuse by proxy is abusive? I think in their mind, they think that they're doing the right thing. If they've heard that person's a child molester, right? All of a sudden, or that person is some sort of horrible person and neglectful parent or whatever, they tend to start taking action thinking like, well, I'm going to show them. I'm going to, I'm going to set them straight. It's kind of this like vigilante type justice. I think a lot of it does come from a good place, but that's the whole kind of like eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Like, I think if anything, understanding, because I've been manipulated too. Like my ex had a really great triangulation going with me and his wife. And so I get it. But that's the thing. People don't realize that they can be manipulated or that we think we can see it coming. And I think being on the other side of that, and thankfully both her and I were able to, within a few conversations, understand what was going on. And so then then we were fine. But that stuff can just get so over the top. And it is important that I think, just treat people with just kind of just dignity and respect. And if we just be brief, like be polite and be brief and then be gone, kind of a thing, especially if they're dangerous or destructive, if you're low contact with them or what have you. And I think too, realizing you just kind of, it doesn't need to get all like Lord of the Flies or people start ganging up on like one person and doing that. But that's, I don't know, so much of this stuff, it tends to be human nature, and it's a problem. Good for you, Camilla. First of all, thank you for the live stream donation. And then says, it's been a while, but I'm dating again and I trust myself. Thanks to you and this community, I just dodged a problematic relationship. I walked away and I feel no guilt about it. Being assertive is being authentic. Good job. Yes. And so, yes, I love that. So that's kind of what we were talking about earlier with learning to trust yourself and just kind of get back in tune with this kind of stuff. And the more, once you can start doing things like this, where you're like, you know what, I knew something was off, I was assertive, or I just immediately went no contact, or this is how I handled it, and this was the result. That kind of stuff, that you're demonstrating competency in it. That's what builds confidence. So me trying to build up confidence in you guys, I mean, I think it can be validating to just have that reassurance of, you know what, like if it feels off, it's generally because something's off. Like just back up a few steps and get some clarity, breathe, get grounded, and then figure out how you want to approach it. The more you do that and the more you start proving yourself right of, you know what, yeah, like that was a confusing situation, or that person was squirrely and I backed up and I readjusted my approach, and I'm so thankful I did. Once you start proving yourself right, it's like learning to ride a bike. Like those are the training wheels, right? And so you do that for a couple of different situations, then you're good. You're good to go. And you're just off. You're just such a awesome feeling. I love it. Christine, thank you for the live stream donation. I appreciate that. Rick is here. Hi, Rick. It's been a while. Mr. Smith, welcome, welcome. Jennifer says, talking about her boyfriend, says, the reason I ask about, the personality styles is because I don't know what is forgivable and unforgivable. He hasn't really shown harsh boundary crossing problems with me. Actually, when we're together in person, he seems to make sure I'm okay with everything. Anything we do, because he knows about my past. We've been long distance for 2.5 years now, and it's hard to present boundaries online. Well, I guess, do you do FaceTime? Do you Skype? Do you, do you talk on the phone? And the whole kind of forgivable, unforgivable, that's such a personal thing. So it's really getting clear on like what works and doesn't work for you. And the whole like long distance, gosh, it is so hot in here. Hold on. The whole, long distance relationship, like what's the plan? Like how long is that going to go on for? And is there any potential of you guys being together physically on a more regular basis? Okay. She says, yeah, we FaceTime at least twice a week and Facebook message every day, at least once a day, if not more. That's good. I think a lot of stuff can come up though, like over the phone and over FaceTime and stuff like that. So I would encourage you, whatever is not sitting right with you, to write that down. And you don't need to have all of the answers right now, but write it all down and just kind of sit with that for a little bit. And maybe just start journaling, like free writing. What is it about this specific thing that concerns me? And then see if you can kind of get some more clarity. And it might warrant a conversation with him down the road, or it might not, just kind of depending on what you come up with. Yes, absolutely. Gina. Yes, Karma. Okay, so Karma says, I have a very hard time cutting people off. I feel responsible for other people in the hurt, and I want to make them feel better. And Gina says, Karma, it sounds like you have amazing empathy for people. I think it takes work to recognize when someone doesn't deserve it from you. Yeah, I get it. I think so many of us get that feeling of we know what it's like to be on the other side of that. And it can rip your own heart out, cutting a person off or breaking up with somebody, or even quitting a job. You know what I mean? We can relate to those feelings, and it can be so hard, and we don't want anybody to hurt. And Gina's right. It does take some doing of getting more on like an equal balance with that, of realizing that if it's hurting you, if trying to not hurt their feelings is hurting you, then something's a little out of balance there. So, and that takes practice. And sometimes those feelings are just there, where we're like, you know what, I feel really guilty for walking away from this person. Like, they're really toxic, but man, they've got a drinking problem or they have a drug problem. And I feel like they don't really have anybody. Like, they've burned all of their bridges. And I fear if I walk away, even though I don't love them, even though they've been awful to me, I fear like what will happen to them. Like, just human being to human being, I am concerned about their well-being. I get that. I think most of us here get that. And it can be really hard. But I think if you can back things up a little bit and be like, you know what, my compassion for other people can't come at the expense of my compassion for me. There has to be a balance there. There has to be a balance there. Or or what was it, Dalai Lama, I think, had said, like, if your compassion for others doesn't include yourself, then it's incomplete. And I would agree completely. Like, it's such a big thing to make yourself a priority. And I know that can feel so incredibly selfish, but it's not. It's being self-protective. It's what self-love is. We can still be compassionate and supportive to other people, but it must always come from us being at a safe place. And sometimes that safe place, if you've got, let's say, for example, if you've got an ex or a family member who is really dysfunctional, really toxic, maybe they're struggling, they're deep in addiction, whatever it is, and you're like, man, I'm so concerned about them. Getting ourselves to safety, and then getting some resources, or potentially calling adult social services, or non-emergency police if it's really that bad, and getting resources. Because what if something happens to us, right? Like, then what? And I know that's kind of an extreme situation, but like, it's hard. It's hard to distance ourselves and not feel obligated to be there for everybody at the expense of ourselves. Okay, let me scroll up here. Yeah, and up yours, Narc says, my brother is a flying monkey and has spent many years systematically smearing my name behind my back, contacting every person who has had meaning in my life, old college roommates, and so on. It's scary. Yeah, that stuff is scary. And, again, like normal, decent people, that kind of stuff might register as like, why that might register as a problem, right? Like, why are you calling me? Like, I don't know you. Like, this is just weird. Seriously, like, you sound obsessed. You have a problem. Like, you got to go. But sometimes if they're in contact with those people, it can sound legitimate. So it's hard. It's hard to kind of nip a smear campaign in the bud and not be impacted by it. One of the things I encourage people to do is, our reputation in general can come and go. And we don't have control over that. Like, all we have control over is our character. And so just, focusing on being a good person, like having solid character. I think the more solid character we have, it's harder for other people to think that we could be capable of half of the stuff that narcissists say we are. And then if we are confronted about it, and it's oftentimes like so not true. It's all the stuff that they were doing. I think just to say, you know what, like, oh gosh, people are setting off fireworks. That's not me. Like, my ex has said a lot of things, and it's, there's a lot of reasons we broke up, and just kind of like leave it at that. But yeah, none of that stuff is true. And that's not me. That's not what I'm about. Like, you would, that, like, if you're in my inner circle, you would know that. Yes, that's a great point, Shannon. Shannon says, healthy people expect us to have appropriate boundaries. I have found that when I added healthy boundaries, healthy people like me better. Yes. Okay. Yes. And not only that, when you're around other healthy people who really value that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication, conflict, disagreement in those types of relationships make them stronger. So healthy people, they value that. They're like, you know what, boy, we got off track. I told the joke. I thought I was just joking. I was just kind of razzing you. It didn't land well on your end. I inadvertently hurt your feelings. I apologize. Thank you for bringing that up. Like, sometimes I think I'm funnier than I am, right? Like, and then the other person owns it, and then things can be smoothed over. Then it doesn't happen again. Then resentment's not continue to be built up. And then people feel closer because they realize, okay, this is a safe space. Like, if I'm uncomfortable with something happening, I don't need, not that people necessarily do this consciously, but like, I can just bring it up. Like, it doesn't need to become aggressive or passive aggressive or passive. I don't need to walk on eggshells to keep the peace. I can just say, hey, you know what? I don't really want to go there for dinner. Or how about whatever the issue is, like, people can meet in the middle and find solutions to things and have real conversations about things. It's huge. It's huge. And it's so refreshing. It's like when you start getting around that, it's like you feel like you can just breathe and you know where you stand. Because then you realize people like that, they say yes when they mean yes, and they say no when they mean no. And so then you're not second guessing things with them. You're not like, oh man, I wonder, do they really want to go to this? Like, did I ask too much? Or things weird? Like, you're not left wondering about where you stand or what's up with things. Like, because people are talking about it. You guys are talking about it, is what I meant. Okay, let me scroll up here. Oh, I love that. Aniko says, I took all of that love and compassion that she was giving to others, and she says, and I gave it to myself. I am healing and getting my heart back so I can be there for others who want help. Yes. I think that's huge. Having that compassion, and man, boy, I mean, it really can come across as so like almost narcissistic, right? If people are new here and they're new to these concepts about like self-love and compassion, all of this can be like, I feel like Alice in Wonderland. Isn't this like narcissism? Isn't this a problem to like love yourself? Like, isn't that what narcissists are all about? And so I think this is kind of a good segue into talking a little bit about that. There's a big difference between self-love and being selfish. And, self-love, and you guys have heard me talk about this before, but for the new people that are here, if you replace the word love with the word value, so valuing yourself, self-love isn't looking in the mirror and just being like, oh, blah, 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 like you're so amazing, you sweet thing, that's weird. Like, it's not, self-love isn't that. It's not taking a bunch of selfies. It's not that, that's its own thing. Self-love is just treating yourself with value. It's valuing your time and your energy and your emotions and your body and your sanity, your safety. It's valuing everything about you. And that can take a little bit of doing, but I think probably the best example of a person that really values something is if you look at a person that has a classic car. Somebody's got like a 1965 Mustang, right? It's cherry red, beautiful, like white leather interior. They don't leave that sitting out in the street, and they don't go driving down gravel roads like on that. You know what I mean? Like, they take care of that car. They wax it and wash it and get it detailed, and they treat it with value. They respect that car so much. They just appreciate it so much. And for us to kind of do the same, like, we're valuing ourselves. We value our time. We protect it. We cherish it. We appreciate it. It's huge. So. Yes. And Karma says, yes, Dana, as an INFJ, I genuinely love people and I want to help them. And you're right. When they and I have a common enemy, which is me, who takes care of me? If I don't defend me, who will? Exactly. And here's the thing too. I think there's a difference between help and empowering people. So, or I should say, enabling and empowering people. So I think there's a lot of us caregivers out there that were like, you know what? I feel like I'm here to help. I feel like that's my purpose for being on this planet. But helping those, it's the whole giving a man a fish versus teaching them to fish kind of a thing. So helping a person only helps them in the short term. Empowering them, giving a person resources, encouraging them, helping them to find their own voice in things, their own thoughts, their feelings, to reconnect with themselves, that's empowering them. That sets them up for an amazing life. And so when we're empowering people, there's not a sense of dependency there. We're helping them to become independent, and So, I mean, when I was a nurse, there were a lot of people that were like, it was hard if somebody was getting out of surgery and it was sort of like, okay, you need to walk. You need to do this. Like this, these are the things that have to happen before you can go home or whatever. And, they were crying, they were in pain. They're like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. And the more of the caretaker, not the caregiver, the caretaker in me would want to just mother them, and just be, and it took all I had to fight that urge. And because part of me was like, oh, just stay in, I wanted to be like, just stay in bed and I'll just be so good to you. And, I'll just be here for you. Cause I could relate to that pain, but it's like, it didn't help. Like they needed to get up and walk around because they had swelling or whatever it was. Like it wasn't healthy. And so encouraging people and empowering them and realizing that helping oftentimes doesn't really help. So that's a big difference there, and letting people build up the self-confidence and the self-esteem of fighting their own battles is just, it's huge. Jennifer, that's a great question, says, I definitely have an inner critic. That's way annoying. But how do I know what my inner child is? Like, is my inner child critical as well? Here's my 2 cents on this. That's a really interesting question. I think, so inner critic tends to be either like that critical parent voice. Maybe it was actually literally a voice that we heard growing up. It was either a teacher or a parent or a spiritual leader or a neighbor or grandparent or whoever, that everything we did was wrong, kind of a thing. So that critical parent type voice can be in our head, but that voice can also come from a place of fear. So let's say, for example, if you never had somebody who was continually critical of you, I think most people have that inner critic voice to some degree. So it's just there. And it, like I said, it can really stem from a place of fear for a lot of people of, who are you? Who am I to have this YouTube channel? Who am I to write a book? Who am I to think that I could do any of this stuff? So that kind of stuff really does surface. And most people struggle with that, the imposter syndrome, or feeling like we're just not good enough, or that we need some sort of validation to do what we want to do in our lives. Or feeling that we're not worthy enough, or this kind of stuff. So that's, and really, I think addressing that stuff is first learning to identify that that's what's going on. I think if we're so used to hearing that inner critic, we don't even realize that that's a voice that's kind of separate from us. It can just feel like, no, this is reasonable. Like, who am I to be doing this? Like, that's, it can almost mask itself as the voice of reason. That's what can be so scary, is that inner critic can sometimes come across as the voice of reason, and it's not. And I think it stops a lot of people from getting out of their comfort zone in whatever way, shape, or form. Losing weight, getting into shape, going to school, switching careers, getting married, getting divorced, whatever it might be. So that's kind of the inner critic, and then combating it. So when that stuff does start to surface, I find it helpful personally to journal and to get as specific as I can about the messages that are coming up, so I can identify them and think about, like, is this really true, or where is this coming from, or what kind of validation do I feel that I need in order to do whatever it is they want to go do? Like, well, why not me? Why not now? If other people are doing it, like, why not me? So, and then just kind of dig in a little bit deeper to get to the root of that inner child stuff, like Sweetbriar was talking about earlier, is like our authentic self. So, and reconnecting with that So as we get older, and this is just, I think, part of growing up in general, is we lose a lot of that. We start becoming the person that we feel that we should be, or that we're told that we need to be. And then we start living this life of expectation. Even if a person has a great childhood, just life tends to separate us from our authentic self. And so coming back to that and figuring out, okay, what are my likes and dislikes? What are my wants and needs? Who am I? Like, who is the authentic version of me? And your boundaries, when we talk about boundaries and standard, or boundaries and deal breakers, your boundaries are the bodyguard of your standards. And our standards are more often than not like subconscious. We're not even aware of like what our standards are. The best way, I think, to look around to see what your standards are is to see what's in your external environment. Like what is, why are you in the friendships that you're in, or the relationships that you're in, or the job that you're in, the clothes that you wear, like these kinds of things that can all give us a clue as to kind of where our standards are for certain things. Not to say that everything needs to be, 5 stars, but because it doesn't. Like that, there's a difference between like, I don't know, like healthy standards and like high maintenance type standards. So I'm not talking about high maintenance type standards. I'm just talking about figuring out kind of where everybody has their own standards for things. It's just figuring out what yours are. And is that something that's in alignment with you? And then our boundaries back all that stuff up. So we tend to make sure that we get our standards met for good or bad consistently, which then that gets interesting on its own. So, okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, James says, yeah, my dad was always critical, never told me what I do right, but told me what I do wrong. And I think what can help too with that kind of stuff, if we have like a critical parent voice on our mind, or we grew up with a critical parent and we were continually told that basically everything we're doing is wrong, or that we should be doing something other than what we're doing. It can help to go back as an adult and view that situation as an adult. So what I mean by that is, I think so often than not, we look at these situations, we're still holding on to it through like the child's eyes, like the child's mindset of, you know what, my dad criticized every single thing that I did, and that really hurt me because he was right? Because I'm the child and he's the adult. If you can go back now as an adult and just realize like your father is just a person, like he's just another adult. And because as children, we see our parents as these absolute authority figures, like they know best. And so if we can go back and look at them through the eyes of another adult, we can just see them. We're like, you know what, boy, that person was really damaged in like a handful of ways. And not saying that how they treated you was somehow, like understandable or whatever, but like realizing, okay, you know what, they were damaged, and that kind of stuff spilled out onto me. And you just see it in a totally different way of like, they weren't right. They were just damaged. Like this is all of the garbage that they got from their dad, or they grew up without a dad or without a mom or whatever it was. And you can kind of just see the bigger picture of it all and realize, you know what, that's so sad. It's so sad that they took all of those fears and all of these concerns or all of this ignorance, and they put this on me. And as an adult, like I don't accept it. Like I see it for what it is now, and I don't accept it anymore. Like I kind of just give all that stuff back. I don't need to carry that around. Like I thought that they had so much figured out and they really didn't, you know? So let me scroll up here. Kamami Popcorn, welcome. It says hello from France. My goodness, that's a long ways away. Hello and welcome. Yeah, Missouri Cowboy says, I'm also an INFJ. I hated it when I first did the test thingy in therapy. It took me a long time to get that others do not feel guilt or remorse, and some even feel pleasure for causing pain. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's just normal people don't think that way, you know? Or we tend to think if I don't know. I think normal people think like other people are going to treat us like how we treat them. And so I think that's one of the hooks as to why we stay trying to improve our communication or to get through to them, because we have a really hard time understanding, like, we don't share the same reality at all. Like they perceive everything through this really screwed up filter of just pathology. I mean, we're just not in the same reality. Everything for them is, they have this domination-driven mindset, this domination-driven reality. Whereas if we have a solutions-oriented reality, we're going to end up twisting ourselves into a pretzel, trying to get through to them, thinking, well, we just have got to work towards a solution. Things keep going off the rails. Like there's got to be a solution. I can work towards it. I'll just get better at my communication. I'll read books on love languages. I'm just going to try everything to get through to them. But until we realize, like, we just don't share the same reality, a person's just going to stay hooked in that. But yeah, especially if you're talking about like a person that can be just so sadistic and just straight up evil, really. It's wild. It's wild to think that people like that walk the earth, and that we could get caught up with somebody like that. And again, I think it's because we might hear about certain stories in the news, or like Lifetime, or like Dateline, or 2020, like these heinous crimes that happen. But because we're only given snippets of it, even like major world events, right? Like, you hear about like the Holocaust, or just other things that have, 9/11, or other major things that have happened across the world. If we're just kind of getting these snippets of it, but we're not understanding the fuller picture of how all of this stuff went down, like the level of manipulation that these people, a lot of them didn't look like bad guys. They might have come across as really, like slave owners, right? Like slave owners had families, they had children. They, went home and played with their dog and tucked their child into bed. And the next day went about, selling off another person's child. Like how do people reconcile that? I don't know. But that kind of stuff isn't talked about. Like we hear, I'm sorry if I'm going off on a tangent, but I just think it's interesting. So bear with me. But like, we hear about these different historical events, like again, slavery, right? Okay, this is what happened and it was really terrible, but it's very watered down versions of history. And then there were slaves, and then Abraham Lincoln, and then now they're not slaves, and then they were freed. But people, like, there's so much more to it, right? And it's so easy for us to have the distance of history, to look back and to feel morally superior, right? Like, well, we just have it all figured out now, and those people, they were just misguided, and they were bad, and not realizing, a lot of them, they went to church every single Sunday. They may or may not have been happily married. Like, you know, they had very different sides to themselves, and just seeing the horrors of human behavior and how that stuff can go down. I feel like it's so important that we learn from that, because we're not above that kind of stuff happening again. You know, like, until we understand how people are able to justify the mistreatment of others, it's going to keep happening. It's terrible. So sorry for that. That was a tangent. Okay. Okay, let's see. Emmy says, why do I feel like throwing up right now? Yesterday, I got rid of a female friend that has been so toxic to me for 2 years. I just feel so sick. Well, I think sometimes it's the adrenaline of the situation, and it's just the feeling of getting out of a toxic situation where toxic situations literally make a person feel toxic. They make a person feel nauseated and upset and just disgusted and sick and angry and just all kinds of unpleasant ways. And then when we're out of it, there's oftentimes a lot of like this rumination, this rehashing of events of, how did this person get into my life? Like, why did I keep them in my life for so long? Like, why did I go along with half of this stuff? Like, why did I allow them to treat me like this? Like, how did I get roped into this? And it's just, you know? So yeah, it takes a little while for kind of like that poison to leave your belly. Like, you just gotta get it out of your system. Writing it out helps. Talking, using like voice memos on your phone and just talking about it and just getting it out of your system really does help. Kind of just more of like verbally throwing it all up, you know? Okay, let's see here. I could totally see that. The sound wave of silence says, besides listening to Dana and seeing a good therapist locally, the most empowering thing I've done for myself is to start lifting weights. It sounds so dumb, but it has been so confidence building. I don't think that sounds dumb at all. That makes total sense to me. I think when we develop that outer strength, it's just that reassurance of inner strength. And it's that instant gratification. You know, you feel good. Not to mention like the dopamine and like all of those feel good chemicals that happen when we exercise, but you're seeing results in your body. You realize that you have control. I think that's one of the biggest things for people after any type of like abusive situation is feeling in control again. Realizing that you're getting back that kind of like the internal locus of control of like, I can control events around me. I can make a positive impact on my environment. There's certain things that I can do, and really, you know, setting a goal and achieving it. I'm with you. I think that's a fantastic use of time and energy and self-esteem building. I love it. I need to do the same. Oh, wow. Dawn says, I just now broke up with a man who was a narcissist, like just 5 minutes. I went back with him. I am so confused. Why? Well, I think that's worth exploring. And we were talking about this earlier. If you can start exploring this stuff, why did I do that? Not from a place of judgment, not from a place of being critical of yourself and, you know, getting so down on yourself, but from a place of compassion and curiosity. Like, why did I do that? Like a scientist, like just kind of a neutral observer, third party. getting curious. Why am I doing why am I doing what I'm doing? And the more clarity you can get as to why, it just starts to open up so many doors. So I think oftentimes a lot of people will continue to go back because they're lonely, or that person's, there's a hook that maybe they're really charming, maybe they're really likable, maybe they're really intelligent or funny. And we've been missing that in our life. Maybe we've made them a really big part of our life. And so then when they're gone, we really feel that void. Like, man, it's just like there's just this big blank space here that they used to occupy. So kind of getting clear and like, yeah, what is it? And then working towards meeting those needs in a healthier way. So if you're like, you know what, yeah, it was the companionship, or it was I really enjoyed our conversations, or yeah, it was the void. Once you get that kind of stuff identified, then you can be like, okay, you know what, I need to find some more like-minded people. I really miss having good conversation like that. Or yeah, we did fun things together. Okay, I need to go make it a point to go do some more fun things on a regular basis. Or if it's that void of just, maybe there wasn't any of that. You're like, I don't even really know. If it was just more of that void of like, yeah, it was somebody to do stuff with. Okay, I need to work towards filling that void, because if those things are some vulnerabilities in your life, odds are there's a solid chance you're going to continue crashing into problematic people in order to get some of those needs met. And the best way to break the cycle is to see the cycle. Okay. Let me scroll down here. Yes, I agree. Green Eyes says, 2 movies I watched this week that turned out to be solely centered around narcissists that I recommend is the movie Tickled and the movie Submission. I haven't seen, gosh, my notes, I haven't seen the movie Submission, but I have seen Tickled. That's really wild. That's a real eye-opener about just malicious, sadistic, twisted, malignant behavior. And it's one of those things I struggle with. Part of me feels like it would help to talk more about some of the awfulness that goes on in the world, just so people are aware of like all of the different ways that it goes down. But then part of me struggles with that. And I'm like, I just don't know if I for sure don't want to induce like fear and panic. I don't know. I struggle with how to approach that kind of stuff. Yes. Come on, me popcorn says, and she says, in case, or he or she, I'm not sure which, says, in case you were wondering, French people have the same issues. Narcissist people are all around and make our lives miserable. Yes. Yes, every country, every continent, every age group, every sexual orientation, every religion, you name it, they're out there. And so it is important that we can spot problematic behavior for what it is, ideally as early as possible, so we can adjust. Mr. Smith says, what I find funny now is pretty much every 80s bad guy movie is a narcissist. Yeah. Now, when you see it, you can really see it. You're like, man, there's a lot of like sociopaths and featured in movies, or like narcissists. There's a really funny YouTube series on, I think it's called Funny or Die. And it's called Zach Morris is Trash. So if you ever watch the show, if you ever watch the show Saved by the Bell, it's freaking hilarious. So it's all of these episodes where basically Zach Morris, the high school character, is a total sociopath, and they keep pointing it out over and over again. They're like, the time that Zach Morris like almost killed his best friend, and then stole his other, like all of these terrible things that he does. And it's like, yeah, I never noticed that before, but yeah, they start pointing it out, and you're like, God, that guy really is trash. Like, how did I not see that? "333 Light Worker says, thank you for your brilliance and generosity. Yes, please go there. I'm sure many of us are triggered with Trump. I'm a malignant narcissist, ASPD. I don't want to be an alarmist. However, we are in urgent times." Yeah. And I think talking about this, I think behavior, maybe just the fuller scope of it. Let me chew on that and kind of see about how to talk about, manipulative stuff. I think one of the problems with government is people are so quick to just say, well, all politicians do that. They all lie, they all cheat, they all steal. And they're kind of given a free pass for that kind of stuff. And to me, I think it speaks more of, there's a problem with the government and as a whole. I think anytime you give people a lot of power like that, it's going to come with a ton of issues. So that's a whole nother discussion, but I think manipulation on a smaller scale, and like, just it's how it starts early on, like the Holocaust didn't start with the gas chambers. Like, it never does. It always starts much further. I wish somebody would do like a documentary that's more about World War II leading up to the Holocaust, leading up to the gas chambers. And, one of the most unsettling things that my ex ever said to me is, I was talking to him about Jack, and he'd said, how do you trust again? Like, how do you move past that? And I had made the comment about, I really just believe that people are inherently good. And I said, if Anne Frank can believe that, then I can believe that too. And he looked at me and he said, well, she said that before she got to the gas chambers. And I still get goosebumps thinking about that, because it was like, what, you're, holy moly, yeah, you're right. Like, she thought she knew evil. She had no clue. She had no clue. What she knew was just the tip of the iceberg. And to me, it's all of those boundary pushes that led up to the gas chambers. That, to me, is what we need to be learning from history. How did that stuff happen? Because I'm sure it was a lot of the same kind of stuff, the justifying. Oh, well, Hitler's done so much for us, and the highway system and the Volkswagen and, the jobs, and this, Germany is going to be this great power again, and like all of this stuff. And I'm sure that people were really divided, and other people were like, hey man, this is kind of weird. Okay, now Jewish people are wearing gold stars. Like, that seems kind of weird. They're slowly kind of losing autonomy, and okay, now they're losing their assets, and now there's a curfew, and like, it's just that slow progression, and people justifying it along the way. Like, that's what we need to learn. So okay, let's see. Faith says, hi, Dana. This might sound weird, but I have been realizing in the past few weeks how twisted an old friend is, and I want to get away from her, but I'm a bit scared. And those kinds of situations, it might just be more of like, you just kind of let things drift apart. You just start staying really busy. You just don't return texts right away. You don't return phone calls right away. Like, you're intentionally putting some distance between you and her. And hopefully things will just start drifting apart enough to where it just becomes a non-issue, where you don't have to have that conversation, especially if you're scared. I mean, that's a pretty concerning thing, to be scared about how a person's going to handle things if you confront them, or any of that. So, okay, let's see. Yes, I agree. Missouri Cowboy says, it appears to me that toxic behaviors are being normalized in movies and news articles. Normal is different from healthy. Yes, it absolutely is. I think it's one of those things, like, healthy isn't terribly interesting. So toxic is what gets the views, right? It's what gets passed around the internet. It's what makes news. It's what sells papers. Toxic sells. Most people, and I think part of it, we're kind of biologically almost wired to be attracted to train wreck kind of stuff like that. I don't know, it just tickles our primitive urges of like fear and, just greed, lust. I don't know. It just kind of gets those primitive juices going. But like, healthy is, it's not entertaining, because there's no chaos there. There's no emotional roller coaster. It's just contentment and like peace, So I think that's the challenge. And we just don't tend to see that kind of stuff in the news. Yes, Mr. Smith says Rockefeller said he wanted a nation of workers, not thinkers. Yeah, it's interesting when you start really kind of getting into that, and realizing that, we just, so many of us, we've basically just been a cog in the machine for a long time. And the whole concept of thinking critically and questioning things and making up our own mind is not only has that not been taught, or it hasn't even been encouraged. It's very much like the whole school system, starting from preschool, is just all about indoctrination, of just getting kids to basically, become factory workers. Like, okay, this is what you got to learn to color in the lines. Like, you've got to learn, the child fits the curriculum kind of a thing. And you're just passed on down the line and expected to think a certain way and act a certain way. And I think it was Paul Simon, in one of his songs, he said something like, what song was that? Something about, I graduated from high school. It's a miracle I can still learn it all. Something along those lines. It was great lyrics. I'll have to look them up. But, yeah, it's really hard for a person to come out of high school and to be able to think for themselves, instead of developing that herd mentality and living those. That's what we were talking about earlier, like living that life of what other people tell us we should be doing, or that we need to be doing. It's so fear-based. And so many of us fall into it. And then if you don't fall into it and you're like, no, actually, I think I'm going to go like do that instead. There's so much like pressure and shame, and people can ostracize you, and there's, just all kinds of pressure to get back in line. So it's hard. I really think that a person's 20s are some of the, especially late 20s, are some of the hardest years, because there's all kinds of expectations. You know, people start graduating from college, or they went to trade school or whatever, but they're getting settled in their career, or they're getting married, they're having kids. There's just all kinds of pressure of like, I need to figure it all out. I need to decide. I just need to buckle down. I just need to stay on this path. And I think there's so many people that are 20 years old or in their 20s that have just kind of thrown in the towel, and they've just succumbed to a life of mediocrity because they're like, well, this is just what it is. You know, like I've been dating this person for a handful of years, and we just need to settle down and get married and have kids. And I don't really like this job, but nobody likes work. So, and then they force themselves to go down this path that they don't even really want. It's hard. Oh, Pedro says, I'm new here. I was searching for another thing, and then I came here. It's the Plinko effect of the internet, especially YouTube. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you. Ileana says, the lyric is, when I think back on all the crap I learned in high school, it's a wonder I can think at all. And though my lack of education hasn't hurt me none, I can read the writing on the wall. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tyler, for the live stream donation. He says, I love Martina McBride's song Independence Day. It sounds like a rah-rah 4th of July song at first, but the underlying message is about a child escaping abuse by any means necessary. It's a rare topic and empowering. I have not heard that song. I will have to check it out. Yeah, it's so interesting when you start listening to lyrics of things and you're like, that's, not saying what I thought it was saying, but very cool. Yes, I agree. Mr. Smith says Schindler's List was the most accurate portrayal to me. I agree. I think that was one of the great things about that movie is it humanized it. It's hard. It's hard for people to understand, like, what does that mean that like millions of people died? Like, we know that that's a big number, but it's so big, it doesn't mean anything. When you're able to be like, yes, and this person's name was Paul, and or whatever, I'm sure that there was a Paul, but like you have a name and an age and a history, and like this was somebody's child or father or grandfather, and like just you bring it back down to a level that we can understand. It's just such a game changer. Same thing with like the poverty, like Save the Children kind of charities. They switched to that model, which I thought was really very powerful, and I'm sure helped donations. Like before, back in the 80s, those kinds of programs, it was all about save starving children. Well, it's so big, it's so many, it's like, it just didn't seem real almost, like what children now. So like, for example, my mom is a really big fan of, there's a program out there called Compassion International. And so she's adopted, like quote unquote adopted, or financially sponsors like 12 kids. Like she has like all these kids that she sponsors. But but she has names, right? So she has all of these kids from all over the world. She has their names and their pictures and their ages, and they write letters back and forth, and it's very personal. So it's not just helping the children. If she does send money, it's helping I don't know, like Maria in Guatemala. And then they send a picture back of like, okay, with this money, they bought, one boy bought his mother like a water, it's like a water storage barrel that helped to filter water. So my mom had given him some money for Christmas, and that's not sweet. Like that's what he ended up doing with it. So you realize that you can actually make a difference versus just kind of it being so nebulous. Pedro is asking about kind of what do we talk about here? He says, oh, I see kind of like self-improvement. We talk about a wide range of things, but like boundaries, standards, deal breakers, manipulation, finding kind of like your authentic self, getting how to kind of escape toxic situations and people, and just a little bit. Tonight's been a little bit of everything, for sure. James says, are there fireworks in the background? Yes, and those are probably going to be going on all night long. So let's see here. Let me scroll up. Oh, that was a great film. Life is Beautiful. Yes. Oh, wow. Pedro lives in Brazil. That is so cool. He says, I was born in a small city called, I'm probably not going to say that correctly, Urini in Amazon. Huh. The internet is amazing. Steffi says, Dana, do you believe there is a noticeable difference between covert and overt narcissists? What should you do if a covert narcissist at work is infatuated with you and doesn't accept boundaries? I would continue to hold them, and I would just make it very clear. And I think being aware of the tone that you're setting. So this can be difficult if you're like a normal, decent person who's friendly and you're like, this is really awkward, but this person like keeps flirting with me, or they keep trying to talk to me, and I don't want anything to do with them. So it can be difficult if you normally are very open and friendly and smiley and that kind of stuff. With that kind of a person, we have to really be aware of the tone that we're setting. And I speak from experience with this. So if this is something that you're struggling with too, it's hard. It's hard to kind of be aware of the tone that we're setting and to even feel like we need to change anything. Because it's like, I don't have the problem. This person's obsessive and just doesn't seem to understand, doesn't respect my boundaries. So, but just making sure that your body language matches your verbal language, so that you're not engaging them in conversation, that you have a very non-approachable face, that you're not smiling, that you're just brief. If you have to interact with them, it's brief. It's ideally around other people. Don't give them an inch. If you guys all go out for lunch on Fridays, don't offer to have them, don't get in the same car with them. Don't be friendly is I guess what I'm saying. Like really hold that line of just stay away, person. And if it continues and you've made it very clear of like, this is not appropriate. This is making me uncomfortable. This is not appropriate. And you really just shut that down. And I would try, like I said, I would try to get other witnesses to your experience. So not talking to this person alone, getting stuff through email, having a paper trail, then the next step might be to escalate it and talk to your supervisor about it and just say, this person's not taking the hint. It's making me really uncomfortable. So, yeah. Yeah, it's always awkward. Yes, that's so true. The sound wave of silence says basically with children, you have to teach them to be critical thinkers, teach them what healthy behaviors are and model them, acknowledge and validate their reality, use examples from movies and other people besides. Absolutely. I think that's really great feedback. Yeah. Like, and I think that's the big challenge, especially with teenagers as kids get older, because it is, well, even with little kids, right? That one of their favorite words is why. Like, why? Why do I need this? Why? Or no. And then it gets to a point where you're just like, okay, enough. Like, just do it, But, and the teenagers are even worse, right? But it is important to be like, let's explore this. Like, let's think about this. Why? One of the best classes I ever had in college was a philosophy class. It was a logic and critical thinking class. Those types of classes should be mandatory, because there's all kinds, like understanding like what a logical fallacy is, and all kinds of like fallacious arguments, and what makes an argument sound or unsound, and understanding like the premise of something and how to sort all this stuff out. It's just so like game changing, because then you can see, you're like, oh, okay, that's a red herring, or that's a straw man argument, or there's no shortage of logical fallacies. What are some other ones? I'm trying to think. Oh, I nothing else comes to mind. There's so many. Slippery slope, and if you Google them, you can read about them. But it's really interesting to learn how to just kind of start thinking critically about stuff, because some arguments can be really persuasive, but if they're or like appeal to authority, that's a big one, especially when it comes to abuse. Of saying like, well, God, who's the ultimate authority for most people, God doesn't like divorce, or God doesn't want, the Bible says that you should do X, Y, and Z, or, the Torah says this, or, whatever spiritual text a person is. And then the person feels like, well, who am I to go against the word of God? Right. And so then but of course it's all this scripture, these different passages are all twisted through the abuser's mind to control their target. And so people can just get all kinds of off center and off base with this kind of stuff and not even realize it. They're like, well, I was just trying to be a good Buddhist or a good Christian or a good Muslim or whatever it might be, and honor my spouse and stay married and all of the stuff. But it's such a game changer. If manipulation and abuse is present, it's a game changer. We're not talking about a normal relationship anymore. So appeal to authority is a big one. Trying to think of appeal to emotion is another big one. So like, instead of addressing the argument, kind of going off track and evoking like an emotion in somebody. Diversion, deflection, which I guess would be more of like a red herring, dragging a person off track. Yeah, I believe it. Karma says, Dana, the ex is a preacher in the military. He used his authority in the church to justify his actions. And it's amazing. It's mind-boggling how a person can justify this kind of stuff. My grandfather was a minister, and he was also a narcissist, and he cheated on my grandmother the whole time. And it was just this twisted narcissist logic of, he would even bring some of these women home and have her cook dinner. And I mean, it was bad. Like, he would get run out of churches. They would move. He couldn't really hold a job other than that. He just, God, just a piece of work, just dragged her through hell. She finally tried to divorce him. He made her basically recant. This was back at the time, I think it was either in the 60s. Yeah, I think it was in the 60s. They published all that in the newspaper. He was embarrassed because it made him look bad. So he made her recant. And then I don't remember if he divorced her or if she finally divorced him. But the way he was able to twist all that around in his mind it's just something else. It's wild to just see somebody just have such horrible behavior and then somehow like reconcile that with themselves. Normal, decent people can't understand it, because it's, how do you do that? How do you justify that? How do you come home every night and like do that to hurt another person like that and hurt your kids like that and just not in sleep and then go to bed? Like, I don't get it. Sure. Lauren says, Dana, I'd love it if you addressed addiction in narcissistic victims. Yes. Okay. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. Karma says, Dana, because he didn't believe what he preached. Absolutely. That's exactly it. I think he did. It was weird. I think he did on an intellectual level, but to me, it's like, if you really believe in God, it changes your behavior. It changes it's the whole like faith without works is dead. Like, if you're a great person only part of the time, but then you're out there just destroying other people like that, like, you haven't found God. It's just bizarre. It's just, or you've compartmentalized. I don't know. He was very much into scripture, and if you didn't know, he came across as really weird. I will say that. I mean, their house was very quiet. They were very, lots of rules, very just kind of a conservative, just no fun, like no music, no TV, like no dancing, no, very strict. Home was all about Bible scripture kind of stuff. But yeah, he didn't like internalize it. Like, he didn't get it. It was just very strange. Just strange. Okay, Lauren, about addiction are you talking about like addiction in like former like targets? So when victims of narcissists develop addiction, I think that's what you're asking. So if that's the case, that's when a person is in an abusive relationship, they tend to cope in multiple ways. Most people tend to cope in multiple ways in general. But if not leaving, or I should say, if leaving is not an option, for whatever reason, they still love the person, they can't financially afford to leave, they can't, for religious reasons, they might have young children, there's any number of reasons why people stay. If leaving is not an option, then they have to become okay with staying. And so people start trying to cope with how to stay in all kinds of ways. And I'm probably telling you a bunch of stuff, but just for the new people here, So if they're experiencing all of this manipulation, let's say their partner's been cheating on them, they've been lying, they've been doing all kinds of stuff, and the target of all of that isn't getting the clarity they're looking for. They're not getting anything resolved. They're not getting the truth. They're getting, half truths or lies, or that's being deflected. And this stuff is just getting more and more crazy making, right? Like you try to bring something up. You're like, when did this happen? Who is this other woman? Why is she showing up pregnant? What on earth has been going on? And they're saying, they're blaming you. They're blaming her, or they're denying it, or it's just frustrating. And that frustration, that stuff builds, and hostility is kind of the inevitable result with pent up frustration like that. But if a person feels like I can't express myself, I can't be assertive with this person because I'm either getting abused. They either start lashing out verbally, or they keep threatening to divorce me, or they keep threatening to cheat on me more, because I keep accusing them. I keep catching them cheating, but then they tell me that I'm nuts, and then they're going to go cheat on me more. Like, if nothing's getting resolved, then a person's going to have to deal with all of that mounting frustration. And so then people start noticing, they're like, man, I feel like I'm changing. There's personality changes within me that scare me. And it could be drinking. It could be getting addicted to prescription pills, or abusing prescription pills. It could be trying to settle the score. So maybe their partner cheated on them. And so now they go out and they cheat. And they're like, I didn't even want to cheat on them. It wasn't even about that. But in their mind, it might have been like, okay, I'm going to do this to settle the score, because now we're both wrong. And so now that we've both cheated, then it's a relationship issue. Like, people can twist all kinds of stuff around in order to try to continue to stay. And so, yeah, very common that people end up becoming addicted to alcohol and drugs. They start numbing out. They start shopping a lot. They might gain weight. They might start losing a lot of weight. They develop an eating disorder. Trying to cope in the best ways that they know how at that time. And when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and especially when you don't know what's going on, it's like a boa constrictor that's just slowly wrapping around you. And if a person's like, I just don't know what's wrong. I don't know how to get things back on track. I don't want to leave. I've got little kids. I can't afford to leave. I just want honesty. I love them. They keep thinking they're holding on to hope that things will change, and it just drags them slowly more and more off track. Very, very common. Okay. Scrolling up here. Emmy says, Dana, do you think manipulation is learned at a young age? And if so, how young? Oh, I think babies pick up on this. They realize, if you've ever seen little kids, right? Like, they're master manipulators. They totally know they're like, okay, I'm either going to scream, or I'm going to cry, or I'm going to be super cute, or when they start learning to talk, they start learning how to be charming and super cute. So people learn to get their needs met at a really young age. And that kind of stuff, This is why consequences are so important, kind of nipping that stuff in the bud and not giving into it. And this is one of the problems with kids that are continually spoiled, is they grow up with this attitude of entitlement. And then it's just this, it can become very dangerous. They can become entitled. They just think the world owes them one. And they can treat other people terribly. So, I mean, some kids grow up spoiled and they turn out, that stuff levels out. They start getting jobs and then they learn really quickly that the world doesn't revolve around them, and that stuff irons itself out. But for a lot of kids, that stuff doesn't happen. And they just become bratty and entitled adults. Yeah, that makes sense. Lauren says, I turned to drugs to numb myself from his cheating. And then it was hard to stop. I'm clean now, but it's such a struggle, and my depression and hopelessness is painful. And when I'm down, I'm tempted to let him in. That makes total sense. I think that's a very real struggle, and it makes complete sense to me as to why a person would turn to drugs to try to numb out to all of that. So, but congratulations, being clean is a huge victory. It's hard. It's hard. I would imagine getting clean and facing reality and being present in the moment is one of the hardest things a person can do. So good for you for doing that. And, the depression and hopelessness, if this is something that's still going on, I would encourage you to go talk to a doctor. So yes, even though a lot of this is normal, it's normal to feel depressed. It can be normal to feel hopeless to a degree. And if it's to the point where it's debilitating, or if it's like, it feels like you're hiking up a hill and it's, knee deep mud, I would encourage you to go talk to a doctor and potentially see about possibly getting on an antidepressant, or at least open up that conversation, because it really can. And I know a lot of people are not a big fan of medication, and I'm not either, but I do think that there is a time and a place. And if things are so bad, especially feeling hopeless, like that kind of feeling is concerning to me that you're saying that. So I would just encourage you, this is part of self-care. Abuse can take a toll on a person. It can take a toll on a person's brain chemistry and put us in a really dark place. But thankfully, modern medicine, it can help alleviate a lot of those symptoms to make things a lot more manageable. And so hopefully that can help with those really dark down times. And then encourage you to, if you haven't already joined some support groups or possibly some other more positive groups. I mean, support groups, I think, are great when a person just needs that support in those moments, but then also positive groups based around hobbies and interests and kind of positive things that you want to bring into your life in this next chapter. C. Finn says, my ex would go to church regularly and say with a straight face that he could do whatever and just ask for forgiveness and he was good. That, like, where do people even get that from? It's like that. No, actually, it doesn't work like that. But nice try. God knows your heart. And the Bible talks all about wickedness, and it's very clear about faith without works is dead, and understanding that, to let, at least for Christians, to let God in your life will change if you've really let him in. It's not like, I swear, just rotten people tend to think that it's like a game of freeze tag when you're a kid. Like you run over and you're like, okay, base, Base, you can't touch me, base. It's like, is that what you think God is? Like, okay, I asked for forgiveness, base. I'm free. I'm good. I'm safe. And it's like, no, dude, this isn't a first grade game of freeze tag. Like, it doesn't, God sees that. God sees through that all day long. So just crazy. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Yes, that's a valid point. Purple Belt says, yes, critical thinking that we learn as nurses. Yes, that was something, it's just a different way. I think a totally different way of approaching things when you're a nurse, or I would imagine, paramedics and anybody in the medical field kind of has the same thing. But yeah, learning to assess a situation and to start ruling out like the most life-threatening things, and then kind of like working your way backwards and just, yeah, being aware. I remember one of my favorite assignments in nursing school was learning to kind of guess what was going on with people. So they would have us go to like Walmart or whatever and just follow a handful of different people and then write up like a description of them, like 46-year-old male, kind of rough weight and height. We would look at skin. We would look at, kind of teeth, their gait, like how they were walking. If there was anything abnormal, like what was their hygiene like, just kind of really seeing a person for that little snapshot, like how we would describe them. It was very interesting. Noticing signs of like, were they dehydrated? Did they have dry skin? Did they, have bruises on them? Did they smell like alcohol? Like what was going on? Stuff that you don't normally potentially notice about other people. Nico says, I'm back in recovery with a 1.5 years clean. Good for you. That's exciting. And says, I noticed I felt just as addicted to him as the drugs. Yes, it is. It's a very addictive thing. It's the highs and lows of these relationships, and it's the whole trauma bonds. And I think just in general, relationships, there's a lot of these bonding chemicals. There's oxytocin, and then there's, dopamine, like the whole things feel really good. And then it's stressful. And then you've got, these cortisol and adrenaline and, just norepinephrine and all these different chemicals it's just this chemical roller coaster that we're on. And it's hard. It can be really hard to break that stuff, but it truly is like preparing to quit an addiction. And it helps getting a plan ahead of time of like, okay, I'm going to be going through withdrawals. Like I'm going to have these low moments, or I'm going to want to contact this person, and or these moments of nostalgia are going to come back, or I'm going to have these moments. It's like when you're struggling with any type of addiction, whatever it is, thinking like, oh, I can handle it. Just one cigarette or one drink or one hit, I'll be fine. I can handle it. I'm in control. It's not a problem now. It's a problem in the past, but it's not a problem now. And then we open the door and then boom, like we're back into it. So yeah, like just weaning ourselves off of it. And it's hard for a lot of people to let go. Like there's that whole like phase that I think most people go through, like obsessed with checking up on them on social media and kind of the nostalgia and thinking about all of the good times. And it's just this obsessiveness of it all. It's just like, it's getting sober off of something, quitting a drug. Okay. Karma says, talking about narcissists and spirituality, and says, Dana, they are God. Yeah. Oh, I think in their mind, it's just delusional. So Missouri Cowboy says, apparently rule number 1 of a narcissist is always blame someone or something else. Never accept responsibility for one's actions. Yeah. And I guess it's because in their mind, they have a reason for it, so I guess part of me can kind of understand why they would get so twisted up and have a hard time having accountability. Because it's the example, I've given before of like, okay, you forgot to get dog food at the grocery store, and then they get frustrated because they're upset by that. And then they yell or they hit or they, whatever the name call, whatever it is that they do. In their mind, they feel justified of, look at what you made me do. Like, I wouldn't have yelled at you had you not and forgot dog food. But a mature person understands that, yeah, I get that you're frustrated, but it doesn't make it okay to like yell and call names and hit. But for them, it's like that doesn't compute. It's like the brain of a child, like a little kid feels entitled and justified. Somebody took their toy, they smack them and they're like, but look what he did. Right. So it's never their fault. It's like, yeah, I get that, but you can't do that. Like, you can't go biting people and hitting people. Like, that's not how society works. But for narcissists, like, they don't get that piece. That's what makes them so dangerous. And that's how they're able to keep such a clear conscience, because they feel that they're always in the right. And whereas like mature people, we understand when you get to a certain age that, yeah, you might have reasons for doing something, but there's still consequences and certain things are still not okay. So it's just not okay to do certain things, like for me, if my blood sugar drops, I guess this is what I think. I'm like, this is what it must be like to be a narcissist all the time. Like, when my blood sugar drops and I get really irritable, and let's say if I go grocery shopping, this is like my common scenario. Okay. Like, I haven't eaten and my blood sugar drops and I can feel myself getting like hangry, and it takes all I have it brings out the worst. People walking slow. You've got a whole family walking like 4 across an aisle, slow. People writing checks in the checkout line. You're like, oh my God, it's just so frustrating, right? And when I'm in those moods, like, it takes all I have to not be a ridiculous, rude person. Like, I have to really restrain myself. And I'm sure. Yeah. Like, I might roll my eyes or like huff and puff or just get impatient. Like, that's my level. Cause I feel like I'm in the right. Like, well, if you walked faster, weren't writing a check or weren't, come on, like, it's all your fault, but it's not. Like, they're just being themselves, right? Like, I'm the one with the problem, not them. I'm the one that's being impatient. And like, the mature side of myself knows that. Like, the low blood sugar side doesn't care. So I guess I can kind of, but that, I don't know, it's a twisted way to live if you're living like that all of the time. Like that's really, really scary. I think if we can see it too, like if a person's living like that all of the time and they're twisting reality, that they're always right, then it's just they're so impulsive that they're just living by their whims. It's however they feel, which is why it would be such a moving target to the rest of us. Like something makes them happy one day, but then it frustrates them the next, or it's never enough, because like normal people are able to like moderate those impulses and the way that they interact with the world, but like narcissists don't, because they feel justified in all of those impulses. It's weird. It's like they're just missing certain filters in their brain. Bricks and Feathers says, I know hangry very well. Yes, that was such an eye opener for me. I think when I was a teenager, I ate terrible. Like I drank a ton of Diet Coke. I smoked. And I mean, my lunch when I was in high school was like a cigarette, a brownie, and a Diet Coke. Like that was my lunch for, years. And my blood sugar was all over the place all the time. And I was such a moody teenager. And I really feel like that was why. And now that I eat on a more regular basis and I can feel those drops coming and I can take care of myself, it's a total game changer. Ah, crazy. I wish I had known about that decades ago. So, okay, let's see. Oh, Purple Belt was talking about the nursing stuff. She says, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Yeah, works well in ER settings to have those skills. Yeah, I feel like it kind of just observing people and seeing them has really helped in so many different ways. Because I think so many of us, we're taught to kind of like not look at that kind of stuff. Like don't judge other people. But it's not even about judging, but it's just kind of about being observant, and you got to pick up on stuff like that. And so like when I was working as a psychiatric nurse, um, and I was working in public health. We worked with a lot of people that were either court appointed, so they had to be there, or were homeless, or on government assistance. And so a lot of them were really sick. And in order to be a good advocate for them, we had to pick up on stuff like this. Like, are they wearing socks? Do they have socks? Stuff that normal people, I think, tend to overlook because we don't want to be rude. But we would have to notice this kind of stuff so we could talk about it, so we could see, okay, does this person need some help? Like, are they really struggling? And yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting, different way to kind of see the world. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Oh, Mulek says, what you said about addiction is so true. I'm in withdrawal right now. It's hardcore. I guess he was my crack. Yeah. And I think knowing that you won't always feel this way, like it's bad right now. If you've ever tried to quit anything else, smoking, drinking, whatever it might be, the first 2 weeks are for sure the hardest. The first, like, it takes about 90 days to develop a different habit. So, if you remember, there was a great commercial that came out a while back. It was the the smoking campaign, and it was these people, like this one lady was putting on her lipstick and just starts like putting it all over her face, and this one guy goes to drink coffee and just like, dumps it on himself, and this other person's driving a car, and I think they like backed into the mailbox, and they were saying like it takes a little while to relearn how to live life without a cigarette. And it's so true. And it's that exact same way with any type of like addictive relationship. Like it takes time to learn. It takes about 90 days, solid 90 days to relearn how to live life without them. And it really does help to plan for that, to write down for when you miss him or her list, bullet points, all of the reasons, all of the awful things they did, the reasons that you need to not go back. And this helps with quitting smoking or drinking or anything else, right? Like all of the reasons you want to quit drinking or lose weight or whatever it might be, post it someplace that you're going to see it or someplace that you can access it if you need to. So you can remind yourself of like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it makes it so much easier to stay on track, to stay motivated that way, and reminding yourself, like, I'm not always going to feel this way. Like I'm just having these cravings. Going through withdrawal. I can do this. It takes about 2 minutes for a craving to surface and pass. I just need to write it out, get a plan. How am I going to handle these cravings? Can I go call a friend? Can I get into a support group online or in person or both? Can I go watch something funny on YouTube, something to interrupt that stimulus response, you know? Yeah, you won't always feel this way. Jennifer says, before I came out about my abuse from my dad, I was with my ex for 9 years. He got really annoyed about petty things and called me names and stuff, but I would repeat my errors, like leaving stuff out, loading the dishwasher wrong, not separating the laundry. So because I didn't correct my ways, would my ex be justified in his frustration? Frustration, yeah. Okay. Like if but let me just clarify. Everybody's entitled to feel the way that they feel. So if that was something that just really annoyed him, he's like, you know what? This is how I do laundry. It's right? He can be frustrated, but that doesn't make it okay for a person to be cruel or hurtful or to call names. Like that's not okay. So like he can get frustrated, then that would mean another conversation. It's either, okay, he doesn't like the way that you're doing laundry. It's like, okay, well then maybe you just need to do your own laundry because I forget every single time. I'm just going to do my laundry my own way. How about we divide up chores differently? Or if it's the dishwasher, people always fight about that. Like, which does the silverware point up or does it point down or that kind of stuff? I always tell people, if I'm washing the dishes, I'm just going to load it the way that I'm going to load it. So like, if you don't like it, then you can do the dishes, but don't micromanage me. It's the dishes. It's fine. Like it's not a big deal, but yeah, that kind of stuff can be really smothering and exhausting. But yes, it's okay for people to be frustrated and angry and upset. It's just how you express that is where it tends to become a problem. But name calling, in my book, name calling is never okay. So. Jennifer says he was so anal about everything. Yeah, that kind of stuff is exhausting. If somebody's continually micromanaging you, I know that type well. And I think you just gotta, I couldn't date that. Let's put it that way. I grew up with that. I couldn't date that. And that kind of stuff, I just, like, this is how I do things. And yeah, continually just being micromanaged and like somebody just smothering you, and everything you do like has to be done their way, or they're right there to correct you. It's exhausting and it's frustrating and it's demeaning and it's, not warranted. So Jennifer says, yeah, his mom was worse about it. So I understand where he's coming from, but yeah, he was verbally abusive. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, even if we know, we're like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, his mom is 100% worse than him. And I can see where that stuff comes from, but it's okay to have deal breakers. Even if we see, I think a lot of people have a hard time walking away because they can see it. They're like, oh, I know exactly what that person's problem is. Like, if it's his mom, like she is such a witch, or she is so controlling, or just geez, or whoever it is, it can be hard to detach from that. But we only have control over ourselves. We don't have control over other people. And most other people us included, right, are not open to other people trying to change us. So, especially if we don't see a problem with what we're doing. And abusive people are very much that way. Like, they just feel justified and entitled and don't have any desire to change. So, yeah. That's so funny. Jennifer says she combs the tassels in her rugs every day. Let's just put it that way. I know exactly what you're saying. Yes, I grew up with that as well. Yeah, and that's a great point, Shannon. Shannon says, I've made so many mistakes too, but my husband, second marriage, is cool with it all. You shouldn't have to learn the right way to do laundry to keep free of abuse. Yeah. Yeah, there should never be the threat of abuse on the table, ever. Ever. There doesn't need to be eggshells, like all of that stuff, eggshells, abuse, the threat of like, I'm going to leave you if you don't do it my way, or if you don't do it my way, there's going to be hell to pay. Like, there should never be that implication there or that actuality there. Like, there's a problem if that's there. So it's okay. People are going to disagree. There's going to be conflict in relationships. It's just how two people handle it. So, it's, I think we are going to be over. My alarm, I thought I set my alarm, but I guess I didn't turn it on. So, okay, we'll wind down now, and then I will see you guys on Tuesday for the live stream in the middle of the day. So, if you want to take some time and just get situated in whatever position feels the most comfortable to you, let's just take some time to just kind of reconnect with ourselves and just kind of be in the moment and just relax. Just be present in our bodies. So let's take a few breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And with each exhale, relaxing more and more, becoming more present in your body. Being here in the moment, realizing that at this moment you are safe, that it's okay to just relax. That it's okay if you're holding on to any pain or stress, tension, or anger. It's okay to just set that down for like the next 10 minutes. And you can pick it up again anytime you feel like it. But it's okay. You can set it down right next to you if you'd like. And let's just be here in the moment. Enjoying what it feels like to be fully present in your body. Just paying attention to your breathing. And now with each inhale through your nose, visualize inhaling a cleansing, restorative light, white or silver. It's easy, it's effortless, it's completely cleansing and beautiful. And as you exhale, just exhaling any negativity, pain, anger, frustration, just letting it all go. So in with the healing and the restorative light, and exhaling with anything negative that you're ready to let go. And again, realizing that that anger, that hurt, and that pain, you can set that down right next to you, and you can pick it up again at any time. We're just releasing all of the stuff that's ready to be released. This is just easy and effortless. Now let's bring your attention to the top of your forehead and slowly start working your way down, releasing any tension that you might find along your way. Relaxing your forehead, relaxing your eyebrows. Notice if you're holding any tension in your eyes, if you're kind of pinching them shut, or if they feel tense, just let them relax. Almost like your eyebrows are going to slide off the side of your face. Just let them relax. Letting your cheeks relax. Relaxing your jaw. Letting your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. Feeling what it feels like to have your face be completely relaxed. Relaxing your neck, your shoulders, letting them drop down and feel how heavy they normally are when they are relaxed. Perhaps rolling them back And again, releasing any tension that you might be holding. And allowing your arms to become heavy as you allow your body to relax. And relaxing your forearms and your hands, letting them fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. Completely relaxing your arms. Now bringing your attention back to your torso. Relaxing your chest. Allowing your rib cage to just open up. It's okay, you are safe, you are here. Relaxing your stomach and your hips. And letting your legs fall into whatever position is the most comfortable for you. And feeling the weight of your legs as you relax them completely. Relaxing your calves, your feet, and your toes. Allowing them to fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. And continuing to breathe. Let's do 7 more breaths. Just being at peace in this moment in your body. Now bringing your attention inward. Taking some time now to reconnect with your authentic self. Realizing this self is always there. It will never leave you. It's just reconnecting with it. Understanding that you've come a long way. And that you're learning to tune into that voice inside of you. That you know deep down what feels healthy for you and what feels unhealthy for you. And you are in control. And you set the pace. Tuning into your emotions and realizing that they're a really great source of feedback for what's going on in your environment. That if something tends to feel off, it's generally because something feels off, because it is off. And if something feels nourishing, it feels nourishing. It gives you energy and it doesn't upset your inner peace. There is no perpetual confusion. There's only clarity. And there is no mental anguish. There's only inner peace. When something is nourishing for you, it helps you to grow. learning to turn inward and getting in touch with yourself, realizing that you are worthy of having boundaries and standards and deal breakers, and that it's okay to say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. And the right people will be okay with that. And realize that you are worthy of being treated with dignity and respect. These are just fundamental human rights, not something that you need to earn or twist yourself into a pretzel over. That's just something that's given to other human beings, other living creatures in general. And realizing that there is a lot that is right about you. And that if your abusive person in your life was telling you all kinds of rotten things, making it a point right now to realize that you can keep that stuff in two different buckets. It doesn't need to negatively impact your self-worth. You keep it in the hurt feelings bucket, but don't let that spill over into your self-worth. And that every rotten thing that they said, every hurtful thing that they did, that's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of them. This is never any reason to be abused. Never, it's never okay. There is a lot that's right about you. That you're moving forward into the next chapter in your life, and it really can be the best one yet. You're becoming more and more empowered and more in tune with yourself and your likes and your dislikes and just your authentic self. And this is when things get to become fun, because you're really living a life of purpose on purpose, and you're just so in tune with who you are, perhaps for the first time ever. And you're doing a great job. It's all about progress, not perfection. You just keep moving forward, doing the best you can, finding your North Star, moving towards what's healthy and nourishing for you. Head in that direction. Treating yourself with value, erring on the side of caution. And you're doing a great job. Now let's just take some time to just send some kind of good energy out into the world, perhaps to other people here in the chat or anybody else that's on your mind. Just reconnecting to kind of all that is good and right. And perhaps thinking about, let's do seven things that you're grateful for. There's always, at any given time, there's at least 100 things to be grateful for. There really is. It could be little things, it could be big things. It could be grateful that you have a roof over your head, that you have a comfortable bed to sleep in. You have a hot, clean shower. That you're able to take some time out of your busy day and just relax for right now. Be grateful, perhaps, for the health that you do have. And when you're ready to come back, come on back. Give yourself a real big energetic hug. Just acknowledging that you know how to keep yourself safe, that there's so much that's right about you, and that you're doing a good job. Just acknowledging that to yourself. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. We do this every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we go for about 3 hours. So I hope to see you next Wednesday. And Angie and I do our live streams every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we alternate YouTube channels. So this coming Tuesday, it'll be my channel, and then next week it'll be hers. So, and then all of this too is also, if you're into podcasts, you can find me on iTunes or pretty much any podcasting place under the name Thrive After Abuse. So if you want to listen to this as a podcast another time, or if you missed part of it or whatever, you can find me there. So thank you guys so much for a wonderful time. Happy 4th of July, and take care, and I will see you next week. As always, just lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and have a fantastic week. Okay? Bye.